Welcome to Food Friends, a podcast inspiring home cooks to try new dishes in the kitchen by sharing trusted recipes, tips, and friendship. Hi, I'm Sonia.
And I'm Carrie. We met in Los Angeles over 15 years ago as personal chefs and haven't stopped talking about food since. We're so glad you're here. Sonia, today we're talking about the summer farmers markets.
It's kind of overwhelming. I feel like it's almost a little easier to talk about all the other seasonal farmers markets because summer, almost everything is available. And how do you decide? And I tend to overshop in the summer.
Always.
I get all the berries,
Yes.
all the tomatoes. I get too many tomatoes and too many ears of corn. And then you have to use it up. So today we're sharing some of our favorite produce items as well as the recipes that go with them.
Exactly. And I think it's such a fun time of year where you can really work with one great ingredient, but there's so many dishes that also include mixes of everything that's available this time of year.
I think we have to start with tomatoes because I don't know about you, but I really only eat fresh tomatoes in the summer. I don't mean to sound like a snob. I just don't think they're very good the rest of the year. So when they're good, when they start coming out in kind of late June through October here, I buy them every single week. I'm going to optimize tomato season.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have cravings in the winter, but it's always such a disappointing experience. We tend to use the cherry tomatoes in the winter, but at this time of year, it's like any tomato that you pick up between like just a regular beefsteak tomato, a Roma, a heirloom, a cherry tomato, you really kind of can't go wrong. So Sonia, what are you doing with your tomatoes in the summer?
Well, I'm going to tell you about a recipe, but I do have to say a classic heirloom tomato sandwich, like a thick slice of tomato and mayonnaise on bread or toast, is honestly my favorite way to enjoy a tomato. And I also have been really into grated tomatoes the past few years. And that's a preparation that's common in Europe and the Middle East, where you literally grate a tomato and the skin sort of comes off as you're grating and you're left with this juicy natural sauce that you can use as a sauce or put, again, on toast or something. And so I found this recipe by Carolina Gellin, who we love, who's been on our show.
Yes.
And it's from the New York Times, and it's salmon with freshly grated tomato and butter. And I thought of you because you and I often talk about how much butter accentuates and enhances a tomato.
It really does. I'm so curious. Is it like a tomato sauce or how is she using the tomato and the butter with the salmon?
So this whole recipe takes 35 minutes or less.
Oh, wow.
So it is about making a sauce, but it's so quick and I love that. So it's like you're barely sort of just heating everything through. You're not spending a lot of time at the stove. So you get your salmon, you pat it dry, you season it with salt and pepper, and you melt a little butter in the pan, and she has you sear the salmon on both sides to sort of get it crispy and brown, but not cooked.
Okay.
Then you transfer the salmon out of the pan, and you add to that your grated tomato. So you take a tomato, you slice it in half, on a box grater, you grate it, and the skin will sort of protect your hand and then easily come off, and you're left with a basically fresh tomato sauce. You add that to the pan with some more butter. And then you nestle that salmon back into the skillet.
Oh, wow.
And you let it cook with the tomato for just 10 or 15 minutes till the salmon is cooked through. So I love that this is all on a stovetop. You don't have to turn on your oven.
Yeah.
I feel like in the summer, I just don't want to turn on my oven. And 30 minutes or less is always an ideal weeknight mealtime amount for me personally. And then it's allowing you to use all those juicy tomatoes that maybe are just a little too ripe.
Yeah,
maybe
that you
bought a
wouldn't
few
put
too many.
that you wouldn't put that on your sandwich because it was
Yes.
getting a little bit too soft. I have been grating tomatoes for years now, and I remember the first time that I grated a tomato on a box grater, and I was like, "Wait, what? The skin actually does peel away and protects your fingers." And so this is even something you can give for a kid to do. This is something I would totally give to my son to do. And there's nothing like the flavor of a fresh summer tomato. I think there's an efficiency to this recipe. You've got some crispiness on the edges, and then you're sort of poaching it to finish with butter and tomato. And then
So it won't dry out.
So it won't
And
dry
so there
out.
are
Herbs at the end.
Yeah, so exactly. It's not quite at the end. So right before you add the tomato, you add the butter to the pan, as I mentioned. You add more butter. Then you add a little bit of garlic and some fresh thyme.
Oh,
and I
wow.
think you could do basil. I think you could do oregano. I think you could do whatever's growing in your garden. And so then you just heat the garlic and the herbs through, and then you add the tomato, and then you add the salmon. So you get that kind of herbal note, the sharpness of the garlic, the sweetness of the tomato, and then that beautiful fish. And, salmon is really great in summer. There's all kinds of wild salmon available.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I definitely plan to make those very, very soon.
I love a recipe that you can get everything at the farmer's market. It sounds delicious.
Well, Carrie, what kind of tomato recipe do you have?
Well, Sonia, this might be surprising to you, but I'm actually bringing a gazpacho recipe. And last summer, when we were talking about recipes, you actually offered this really great gazpacho recipe that had coconut water in it. Once you talked about it, I made it like 4 times. My family loved
Really?
it.
I didn't know that.
We ate that until the summer tomatoes went away. I could not have loved that more. It just was so refreshing, and it had great flavor. And I'm one of the people who, and I bet there's a lot of us out there that feel like a badly made gazpacho kind of tastes like you've taken salsa and you've just like put it in a blender, and I don't there's something so not great about that. And so I was looking at all my tomato recipes, and there's a Nook Chum gazpacho recipe that I came across, and Nook Chum is a Vietnamese dipping sauce. And so it's kind of this clever recipe. It's chili peppers, garlic, sugar, lime juice, rice vinegar. That's kind of what goes into this dipping sauce. And so what the recipe writer, I think it's Kendra Vaculin for Bon Appetit. So she takes like 2 pounds of tomatoes, a cucumber, some scallions, a Fresno chili. I only added 1 chili to mine, and that was enough for my family. 1 clove of garlic, fresh lime juice, fish sauce, a little bit of fish sauce. And
that's going to make all the difference.
It made all the difference. And, I was curious. I have a 9-year-old son. What is he going to think when he tastes this? Fish sauce is a flavor that is assertive. I cannot believe how well balanced this recipe is. It also has 1 tablespoon of toasted sesame oil. And when I kind of compared these recipes to this coconut water one that you offered, and then another one that we had posted last summer was Julia Moskin's 15,000 5-star reviews from the New York Times. Hers has a half a cup of olive oil in it. And she describes—
That's a lot.
It's a lot of olive oil, but it's a very traditional Spanish gazpacho. She describes it as fluffy. And I have to say, this one is definitely more like— it's like Gatorade. It's very refreshing.
You don't mean it's thin.
No,
you just mean it's
thin and it's refreshing. When you're so hot, and when you just need something that's a little salty, a little limey, a little tangy, and very full of tomatoes, this is an excellent recipe.
That's so good to know. And I feel like we had a mind meld, because I was thinking about gazpacho because I just checked out a Jose Andres cookbook about vegetables. And in it, he said of all the recipes, like the hundreds, maybe thousands of recipes he's shared in the world, the one people literally stop him in the street about is his wife's gazpacho recipe.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Isn't that so interesting? I was just reading that and I was like, gazpacho, of all the things Jose Andres makes, why that? And so I think it is an important reminder. I think a lot of people only have had kind of mediocre gazpachos at restaurants or at a wedding. They serve it in a shot glass.
Yeah, and you're like, whatever, I'll pass on that one,
Right. But it can be transcendent and refreshing and amazing.
Well, I think it's a summer moment, the moment of the summer farmers markets, and when they're everywhere and everyone's out and everyone's tan and you've got your big brimmed hat on or your baseball cap because you're trying to hide from the sun. This is something that will really like cool you down and give you that relief that you're looking for.
Yeah, that's true. Although I've never been tan in my life, not one day. So I will be the pale person with the big hat. I think you also can't talk about summer produce without talking about corn. We did a whole corn episode, which we can link in our show notes too. I think last year or the year before. Corn is like the thing everyone gets so excited, especially in those first weeks. And I love all kinds of fritters. We've talked about a bunch of different fritters on our show over the years. And I also love finding recipes from the masters of vegetables and produce. And I think one of the absolute matriarchs of that is Alice Waters.
Oh, yeah.
And so there's this Alice Waters recipe from Chez Panisse Vegetables from that cookbook. They're called just like Alice Waters corn cakes. They're very simple.
But there's so much more than that.
Exactly, because I feel like what she does is she tells you how to make the vegetable its best self. And that's why I trust her recipes so much. So the ingredients are very simple. It's masa harina, which is a corn flour, baking powder, butter, milk, a little bit of honey, very little, like a tablespoon, and then 2 whole ears of corn and some eggs. She also adds jalapeno, which I love, a little pepper with corn. And if you didn't like spice, even green pepper
Oh
here
yeah.
for that
That
flavor would
vegetal
be so
flavor
lovely.
pairs so
Yeah.
well.
And she recommends cooking these in either ghee or
Oh
clarified
my
butter
God.
or lard. Ghee is clarified butter.
Yes.
And that's because it has a high smoke point. So it's
Yeah.
not going to burn. Regular butter will burn. But you could use oil if you didn't have any of these things. But you're just whisking it all into a batter. That's essentially it. The only thing that's a little chefy in this recipe is that she has you beat the egg whites into fluffy, stiff peaks. And that really helps this kind of corn cake be light and fluffy. But honestly, like
You
in
don't,
secret,
yeah,
if you
you
didn't do
didn't, if you
that,
didn't
it's
do that.
totally fine. It's
Well,
not the end of the world. It's going to be a little more dense. And then you just cook it in your pan in that clarified butter or that ghee, which, that flavor is amazing. And it makes about 16 little corn cakes. I feel like this can be the start of a meal with a really refreshing salad, or it could be a side with some grilled meat or fish.
well, I'm thinking about this as one of those meals where you gather people around your frying pan. This to me feels like me, my husband, my son going to the farmer's market, coming home and eating this, coming kind of right out of the skillet, and you're eating it together. Or if you're on vacation, you're going to the farmer's market. People are so wooed by corn in the summer. If I see it and it looks fresh, I pick it up.
And it could be a great, to your point, if you're traveling, a great brunch. If you have a kitchen, if you're somewhere, if you're renting an Airbnb or a place with a kitchen, this topped with some eggs, like poached eggs or even a sunny side up egg. What a great
Oh
breakfast.
my gosh, that sounds incredible. Well, one of the corn recipes that I thought was really interesting, it's called Summer Garden Tortelloni. I know we talk a lot about tortellini. Certainly when I was growing up, we used tortellini and tortelloni interchangeably. Tortelloni are typically a vegetarian pasta filled with cheese, and tortellini are typically filled with meat. So this dish uses shelf-stable tortelloni that's filled with cheese. And so you get a pot of water going, you boil that on the side, and then in a saute pan, you get half a stick of butter, a little bit of prosciutto, and a couple of ears of corn.
Wow.
Yes, it turns out really interesting. So you get your corn a little cooked and you sort of crisp up your prosciutto. And while that's cooking, you chop up a couple of ripe summer tomatoes. And once the corn is cooked, then you combine it with these raw tomatoes. So again, it's this tomato butter combination. Then you toss it with the cooked tortelloni, and then you add some chopped basil to it. And so what it really becomes is a little bit of a pasta salad, but it has like a cooked element. It has the smoky element with the prosciutto. It has the butter that kind of coats all of that tomato. It's one of those recipes that I think lends itself so well to whatever you have in your kitchen. If you had some zucchini, you could cook that along with the corn. You could add some eggplant to this. You could add whatever herbs that you had going on in your garden. But I think if you wanted to crisp up some shelf-stable gnocchi, if you didn't eat pasta, that could also be really interesting.
Yeah, I think this is also such a great quick weeknight meal. Again, something that can happen really easily with something from your pantry. A shelf-stable tortelloni is such a good thing to have. I think we forget about them. I also, though, think you could make this with fresh tortelloni or tortellini, whatever you can get your hands on. And those terms, as you've so well explained, can be confusing outside of Italy. So whatever stuffed pasta with cheese is going to work for this. And it is accentuating these perfect summer flavors and ingredients. I love a melange of things that's almost like a succotash.
Yeah, and I think to your point about it being a quick weeknight dinner, this is literally from Gourmet of August 2007, and it's from the column that is 10-minute mains. And so just kind of throwing it all together and eating it. And I think that's kind of what summer is also all about. Is like barely cooking what you've got, preserving those flavors, highlighting them, and just throwing a bunch of herbs on and calling it a dinner.
I also think summer can be about this mix of something very rich with something very fresh and light.
Yes.
So your half a stick of butter.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring up sabich, which involves a fried element. So sabich is an Iraqi dish that was very popular in the Iraqi Jewish community. And sabich is just one of the most satisfying sandwiches. but it involves eggplant, which eggplant is really one of my favorite summer ingredients as well. It's another thing I tend to buy more in the summer, even though you can get it year round at the grocery store. At the farmer's market, I can only really get it in the summer. And so it's not that hard to make this, but there's all these different elements. The good news is you can make each element whenever you feel like it. You can get some of these store-bought. So I'll just tell you the typical elements in a sabich. There's a pita. Inside there's fried eggplant, hard-boiled eggs. There's actually a specific cooking method for the eggs traditionally, but you could use just regular hard-boiled eggs. Then usually some kind of chopped vegetable salad with cucumbers and tomatoes, and tahina or tahini sauce, some kind of like saucy, creamy element. And then a lot of times people love to add amba, which is a fermented spicy mango sauce that I'm obsessed with.
Yes.
It's so good.
But you can buy that. You can make it or you can buy it.
You can buy it. This is something you probably will not want to make because
Right.
I have made it. It takes a long time. This is something definitely is like store-bought is fine. And it has fenugreek in it, which fenugreek is very mapley. So it has this incredible sweet, earthy, spicy note. And then if you don't like spice and can't find amba, you don't need it. And a lot of people also just use a harissa sauce, which you can also buy store-bought, or you don't need any of those things. Even just the basic elements are going to be delicious. So what you do is you take a big eggplant, you cut it into rings about 1/2 inch thick, and then this is the step that really is kind of important, is to salt it and let it sit for an hour.
Oh, a
So
whole hour.
This is ideally a whole hour.
Okay.
Now, I am sometimes impatient and don't do it, but when I do it, it's really better for this dish. It draws out all that extra moisture, which you want because you're going to fry these. So then you pat your eggplant dry and all you do is dredge it in cornstarch. And then you fry it
interesting.
in oil.
As you were describing it, I was thinking of it as a schnitzel. I was like, this is like eggplant
Yeah.
schnitzel, but it's not. It's a much different experience.
Eggplant schnitzel is delicious, by the
yes.
way. So I'm glad you mentioned that. But no, this is taking your eggplant. And I have to say, deep fried eggplant that's not battered. That's not like for eggplant parm. That's just pure eggplant is one of the most incredible things I've ever had.
It's
We
like
used to actually
so
make
caramely.
Yeah, it's so caramely. It's so rich because it's such a sponge. It's a very decadent, but you don't need a ton. So it is very oil rich, but you're going to only fill your sandwiches with a few slices. So you make a big batch of these. They store well in the fridge. You could lightly reheat them if you want. And then you build your sandwich with those slices of eggplant, slices of hard-boiled egg, all that beautiful chopped salad, amba, tahini sauce. Oh my God, it's heaven.
I mean-
and I would serve this for dinner.
Yeah, this sounds like a really great summer dinner because you can make your salad the day before. You can buy pitas. I have also been making a lot of homemade pitas, which I love. I have to admit, I have had this sandwich at a restaurant in Atwater Village called Dune. And,
Oh, yeah.
and I had never had that before. And I still remember it to this day. It was so delicious, but I did not know how to say sabich. I was saying it in the Chicago way, savage. So I'm so glad to know how to say it. But I think as someone who really did not grow up no one ate eggplant where I was from. I just find that especially the Middle Eastern cultures, there's so many great ways that they do delicious things like a fried eggplant and a pita. It's just a great vegetarian meal.
Yeah, and you reminded me of an element in the sandwich that I love that Dune did, and there used to be a place in Portland that closed that did it too, which is adding some kind of pickled beet.
Oh, yeah.
Like a shred, or like even a shredded beet salad. The beet is commonly found, and that combination of the eggplant and the beet and the egg and the fresh vegetables, it's so good.
Yeah.
Definitely worth trying.
Yeah. Well, Sonia, last night I tried this recipe. It's called a zucchini rice gratin or gratin, and it comes from Gourmet in 2008. So this is kind of like an older recipe. It's one of those really fantastic recipes that is so beautiful in its simplicity, but again, there are a couple of steps. So it has zucchini, it has tomato, it has rice, it has a little bit of thyme, and has a lot of Parmesan and olive oil. What you do, they suggest that you steam 1/3 of a cup of rice. So it's not actually a ton of rice. I keep a lot of rice in my freezer if I have leftovers. So I pulled rice out of my freezer last night to make this. And you roast some zucchini, you roast some tomatoes. So you're really kind of concentrating those summer tomato juices. And while your vegetables are roasting, you saute an onion with 4 cloves of garlic. I use a pretty generous amount of olive oil too. So all these elements I salted really well and I peppered really well. So with the rice, you combine it with a couple of eggs and a quarter cup of grated Parmesan. In my casserole dish, when everything was done, I put a little bit of olive oil. I put half of the rice mixture. So it's like rice mixed with a little bit of olive oil and a little bit of Parmesan, salt and pepper. And then I added half of the vegetables. You add the rice on top. You add the other half of the vegetables. And then you top it with more grated Parmesan. It's a vegetable casserole, but it's mostly vegetables and Parmesan cheese, a little bit of rice, and that is mixed with egg. With a salad, it was just so delicious.
It's interesting that you roast the vegetables first. I understand why you would do that because otherwise it would get really soupy and soggy.
I think what was great about the roasting is, zucchini is a watery vegetable and tomato is a watery vegetable. So you're really concentrating that flavor. You get sort of that toasty caramelization on the outside, and it also helps with the texture, I find. It caught my eye because I recently had dinner at a friend's house and one of the members of their family is gluten-free. And so I was like, oh, this is a rice casserole. That's interesting. And, you and I share a love of Gourmet Magazine, which is sadly, we don't have it anymore. But their food styling was incredible, especially in these this is considered from the quick kitchen category, which I found
That's hilarious.
To be sort of fussy.
That's a little misleading.
It was a little misleading, I will say.
But it doesn't, it's okay if it's not quick, if it has good results. And I like this idea of it's a great way to use up zucchini, which we're always looking for in the summer.
Absolutely.
Great way to add in some of those extra tomatoes. And again, they don't have to be perfect because you're roasting them. And I love a rice casserole. So I'm so glad you share this because it is a gratin, but a gratin is a casserole.
Yeah.
It's a fancy word for it.
Totally.
So Carrie, I can't think about summer without thinking about melon and watermelon in particular. I start to really crave it the second it gets above 80 degrees.
Sonia, I have a mixed feeling about watermelon from the farmer's market because as someone who used to sell watermelons and sweet melons at the farmer's market, I found that most people would look at the watermelons, but they wouldn't buy them because I think it's a pain to carry a big, giant watermelon around the farmer's market. Even though I'm a person who usually has a cart, unless I get the watermelon first, then I can't find space for it in my cart. And so I think watermelon is more, for me at least, a grocery store item. I think watermelon is one of the most important fruits of the summer. It's so delicious, and this is the time of year to eat it. But I don't know that I always buy it at the farmer's market.
Our watermelons tend to be really small at the farmer's market. Partly that's because they don't grow as well here as they do in California, where you get those huge, very sugary, juicy watermelons, which are frankly better. I think buying watermelon at the farmer's market is an incredible treat. I do it once a summer because it's a lot more expensive than the grocery store.
It really
just
is.
Frankly, it's a bigger investment. But when I can find an amazing small, and usually I'm talking about really small, like you can throw it in your tote bag small. That's what I'm usually buying. And I have a few farmers I rely on. If I'm going to put in that investment, it's going to pay off and it's going to be a good one. And if I'm going to get a great watermelon from the farmer's market, I want to treat it extra special. If I'm getting watermelon from the grocery store, which I obviously do as well, that to me is like slice it up, put it in the fridge, get it ice cold, have it at the beach, have it,
Right. Add a little
keep
salt.
it simple.
Yeah, exactly.
But my farmer's market watermelon, I want to just treat a little differently. And this is just me. If you don't want to buy watermelon at the farmer's market or you can't find it, you could use any watermelon you can find for this recipe. But I love a watermelon salad that has a savory element to it. So obviously the classic we all know is watermelon, feta, basil, or mint.
Right.
And honestly, I usually make that at least once a summer too. I think that's a crowd pleaser. I like it. The salty and sweet works so well. But I'm really interested in all the different takes on a watermelon salad that might not have feta because that is so expected. Yeah. So there's this beautiful Gregory Gourdet recipe that really inspires me. And Gregory Gourdet is a chef in Portland. He's of Haitian descent. He does a lot of plant-based cooking and gluten-free cooking. And so he really is another person who knows how to treat a piece of produce well.
Yes.
So he shares this watermelon berry salad with chili dressing and lots of herbs.
Oh, wow.
And
spicy sweet.
Yes.
Right.
And this is what he says about it. He goes, a thrilling way to treat high summer fruit. This gorgeous jumble of flavors and textures is explosively good. It's Thai inspired. So he has these sweet and spicy elements. So the salad itself is watermelon peeled and cubed, a red onion, some good flaky salt, and mixed berries, 6 cups total.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of berries.
Yeah, a lot of berries. It's 2 pounds of watermelon.
Okay.
I think you could take half of this recipe and do a pound of watermelon and 3 cups of berries. He also includes lemongrass in the salad, which I think is really interesting. So then the dressing has lime juice, fish sauce, cilantro, some sugar, some galangal, which you could swap for ginger, garlic clove, and a Fresno chili. Also, he includes a Thai chili. I might skip that because that might be too spicy. And then it's just dressing all of this in this very Thai inspired sauce, which kind of reminds me of your Vietnamese gazpacho flavors as well. There's sort of like an echo now between the beginning of our episode and now, but I really think there's something about taking these sweet summer ingredients like a tomato, like a melon, and pairing it with something really assertive savory, to your point. Yeah, and really savory and really salty. And I would do this with a side of some kind of grilled protein.
Yeah, grilled chicken. Like if you had some like not sad, but boneless, skinless grilled chicken. That's something that you want to be eating in the summer because it's light and it's kind of getting the job done. But with this salad, my God, that would be delicious.
Yeah, so I'm excited to make more watermelon salads this summer.
I really, really love that idea. It certainly becomes an invitation when you see one of those small watermelons that may be red, or also at our farmers market, sometimes we have the yellow golden ones that are really cool looking. It's like,
those are so good.
Yeah, that's something that you could do with this, and it would be something so different and unexpected. So Sonia, I have one more recipe that I want to talk about, and it's actually something I picked out because it reminds me of you. And it's a grilled pepper and herb relish. It's a very simple recipe. You do it on the grill. You just take a mix of bell peppers or pimento peppers, whatever peppers you find at the farmer's market. I have to be honest, I kind of never paid attention to their names until I started hearing from you. The names like the Cubanelles and the Jimmy Dardellos. And of course, they all have variety names, and so much of what I love about produce is how they're named, but I just had never thought about it that way. So any mix of these peppers, you throw them on your grill, you get them a little charred, you stick them in a bowl, you cover them up so that they steam a little bit, and then you peel them, and then you just make a little relish with olive oil, a little bit of sherry or red wine vinegar or champagne vinegar, and some fresh herbs, like a fresh marjoram if you have it, or an oregano, which I think in the summer when people have oregano in their garden, it's like everywhere. Basil would also be great because it would add a little bit of sweetness. And then salt and pepper. And this is something you can make ahead of time. The recipe suggests that you serve this on a crusty piece of bread like crostini with a little bit of soft cheese like a goat cheese. So you could do a little bit of feta. But I think for me, it's the peppers, the bread, the cheese. There's not much more I want in the summer than that.
Well, I always call you the queen of crostini, and I think ending on a crostini is very appropriate. I love the simplicity of this because I don't want to distract from the greatness of the summer produce. None of these things need much to be good. I mean, we did talk about things that you amplify and accentuate, but usually some good olive oil, some good vinegar or lemon juice, and the vegetable itself is all you need for it to taste good. And so the idea of like the char of the grill and making a really simple relish and topping it on some crostini that's really well oiled or buttered. Obviously, goat cheese is such a good pairing for a red pepper, but you could do it without it. I think it would still be really good.
I completely agree. The perfect menu would be if we started with this pepper crostini and then we had that incredible watermelon salad and some grilled chicken and your chocolate chip cookies. That's what I would ask for.
If we you're talking.
We're going to have our own summer dinner together. That would be incredible.
That sounds amazing. Well, I'm really in the mood to go to the farmer's market this weekend.
Same here. Until next time.
Bye.
Thanks for being our food friend.
If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with friends. We love hearing from you, so follow us on Instagram or drop us a line at foodfriendspodcast.com.
Yes, we'd love to hear from you and your food friends. Happy cooking and eating.